Wow, here we go. Another episode of the Moped Outlaws. Today, our guest is Alex, and she is the Astrology Royale.
Yes,
It's amazing conversation for sure. It was really fun.
it was wonderful, and her energy was wonderful, and I think, yeah, I'm speechless.
Yeah, yeah. It was really rich. You guys are gonna love it. It goes for the good ride. It's a good ride. So definitely stick around for the really important question we ask at the end that we ask all our guests. And if you don't know what that is, oh my goodness, you got to
And
start figuring that out.
yeah,
And
because we
then
might have you on.
yeah, the other thing is the depth of her answers and the sweetness of being in her presence was so rich. So you're in for a treat for sure. And please subscribe, share it with your friends,
Support
donate.
Blast, Compton Cowboys, and hit us up if you want to be on. The hosts at mopedoutlaws.com, and enjoy the ride.
Sis, hallo?
Leven.
Bestuur zeker wegen them.
Joi, iets niet, joh.
Sitaki ubenza, anika sirikie.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And we're live with another episode of Moped Outlaws. And today, our rider with us is Alex, who is Astrologer Royale. That sounds like a dessert.
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind being called a dessert.
It's great to have you, Alex. You know, one of the things I noticed when I was thinking about this conversation and looking at the materials that I had to look at, how you are kind of a unique flavor in the astrologer arena. You are kind of a dessert. Maybe actually you're more of the main course.
Well, that's quite the compliment too.
Yeah, I love the way that you frame your main offerings. Of course, you're going to do individual stuff. That's what people usually think of when they get into working with an astrologer. But there was also a calling to a higher level of service that I noticed about what you're doing. And before we get into some of the macro or the details, I'd love to know what it is about astrology and your journey to discovering this relationship to it that happened in your life. How did you arrive here? How did you get to be in this place?
Well, Mark, I was like super lucky. So my grandfather was an amateur astrologer. And my grandparents lived 2 hours north of Toronto in a place called Midland, and it is swampy and marshy there. So going outside to play as a kid, I mean, you could go and catch frogs, but you can only do so much of that. So what I would do is I would go and delve into my grandfather's books. And so he had, the Book of Unexplained Mysteries, which talked about like the Ogopogo and the Loch Ness and all of these crazy things. But then he also had his astrology books. And the astrology books that he had featured the mythologies of the Greek gods and goddesses. So Athena and Zeus and Ares and Aphrodite. And I loved reading their stories. And there was something that just resonated even as a child that I couldn't explain. And so every time we went to go see my grandparents, I would go and steal his astrology books, basically lock myself in the guest room. My grandmother was a bit of a hoarder, so there was always like tons of snacks, right? So I was always okay. But I would go and lock myself in the guest room, and I would read and read and read. And I was about 10 when I first learned how to cast my own chart. So my grandfather had what's called an ephemeris. And so I used that to plot out where the planets were in my own chart. And he also had some of the original computer software for casting charts. And he had done it for all his grandkids, including me. And that was really where my love affair started, and it never stopped. As I grew older, I would go and take out books in the library about astrology. And then I'll take us back in time to the early GeoCities pages of the internet. I don't know if you guys remember those. I
Yeah,
see the
we're old enough to
smiles.
remember that.
And so that was how I continued studying astrology. And it was just something that I have always loved and has just never left me. It was my first love in life.
Got it. Would this be a good time to just sort of each of us declare what the three main things, the sun, our moon, and rising? Do you know?
I
Greg?
love it.
I only know that I'm a Leo, which, and I think we could just end it
I
there.
have my charting program open here if you happen to know your details, Greg.
It has been done for me. Okay, I know I was born August 6th. I think it was around 11:53 p.m., 1962.
Okay. Oh, what just happened there? It closed on me.
The gods are saying, Leo's enough. That's all we need to know.
Oh, no way. I can make it open again. It's easy.
Mark's delving into his library. So the two astronomers are busy at
Or
work.
astrologers. And I wouldn't claim astrology other than as a dabbler. I'm a dabbler.
Alex, are you okay with the question while you're bringing up this info?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Greg, can you repeat your birthday again, your birth information?
August 6th, 1962, 11:53 p.m.
Okay. And where were you born?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, fun place.
I was only there for about 3 weeks. And then we moved to Los Angeles.
Here we go. Okay. So your sun is Leo, your moon is Libra, and your rising is Taurus.
All right.
So kind of interesting because it's a lot of Sun and Venus energy.
That's what I recall, a lot of sun energy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the sun is all about creativity, family, so even you mentioned this earlier, before we jumped on, about working together like family. And that's what Leo is about. It is about creating that safety that a family can function in together. It is the archetypal father, actually.
I'll go next. I
love it.
Pisces with a Leo moon and a Scorpio rising.
So there's depth and warmth to you, Mark. I love it. So very reflective nature, but not one, how do I say this? Prone to misery and navel gazing.
Yes. How about you, Alex?
So my sun is Gemini, and then both my moon and rising are Sagittarius.
Very grounded.
All right. So someone in my life asked this question. In romantic relationships, what is wise to concentrate on in a horoscope or astrology?
Well, that's a great question. So it's one that I kind of encounter often. And to be honest with you, it's not so much about the zodiac sign when it comes to relationships, because that's kind of like saying that certain people shouldn't date certain people. Right. So I call it signism, and signism is as bad as racism, sexism, all of it.
I like that.
So what it's really about is, and you kind of have to know your birth information, because the potential for compatibility literally lies with anybody. And so there's a form of compatibility called synastry. And what that does is it looks at the interplay of masculine and feminine energy between two partners, as well as sheds light on how you emote, how you communicate, what your needs are in relationships. And so when you actually look into the synastry, that gives you a lot more depth. So I always tell people, when it comes to dating, see who you're actually attracted to. Now, if you're repeating certain patterns, as in like not dating the right people for you, that's often when I invite people to have a natal chart reading, because sometimes there's a disconnect between the right kind of partner for you versus what you're attracted to. And so when you go into the natal chart, that can be very revealing. So even for anyone who's single out there, I always say start with your natal chart first, and you look at either Venus or Mars.
What differentiates a natal chart from any other chart?
The natal chart is your birth chart.
Okay.
The natal chart is your birth chart. And so, for the single women out there, go and take a look at where Mars is in your chart, because that's going to tell you about some of the archetypes and the qualities that are going to be mirrored in the best possible relationship for you. Whereas for men, you would look at Venus, and Venus is going to reveal the healthy archetypes and qualities that are going to work in a successful relationship. And I want to also kind of make the caveat here that it actually doesn't matter whether you are in like a straight or gay relationship, right? Because it's more about the archetypes, because every one of us has both within us anyways.
Yeah, both. Yeah. This is beautiful. So is it the house that Venus is in, or what is it about Venus I need to know?
So you can look at the house. You can also look at the sign that she's in. And also, is she making any what are called aspects to other planets? Right. Wow. So Mark, could you actually, do you have your chart handy?
I do on my phone. It might take a minute to pull it up. Give me a second.
So while
we're doing that, go ahead, Greg.
So the natal chart's the birth chart. That makes me think there's other forms of charts.
There absolutely is.
So I'm wondering, in the Steiner philosophy, which I'm very familiar with, there's that pivotal time in a person's life at 9 years old.
Yes.
Is there a chart equivalent to that?
I wouldn't say necessarily there's a chart equivalent to it. What I would say is that there are what are called aspects that kind of coincide with it, is how I would explain it.
And you just referred earlier to aspects with Venus. What is an aspect?
So an aspect is a relationship between two planets. So in astrology, basically aspects are when the planets make sacred geometric relationships to each other. So you have what are called soft aspects. So soft aspects are, as an example, you have sextiles or trines, and that is when two planets are basically in harmonious geometric angles to each other. So a sextile is when they're 60 degrees away, and a trine is when they're 120 degrees away. Right? And then you have hard aspects. So a square would be one of them. A square is when two planets are 90 degrees away from each other. And you can kind of think of it like a T-bone accident. Or you have the opposition, 180 degrees away from each other, right? Kind of like a face-off. Right. And so different aspects can create different insights and relationships and how do I explain this? Conflicting priorities sometimes.
Okay, and it looks like Mark's got his chart up.
Well, it's interesting to see how this conversation is already the portal through which a lot of people access this information is built around the idea of compatibility and partnership, because romantic partnership is one of the most emotionally intense pieces for all of us. And when we are seeking the wisdom of the spheres, for lack of a better term, that's one of the key areas we look for, right?
Yeah.
But there's also one of the things that you do, which is about how this impacts your strategic capacity as a business, how this affects your productivity, the way that you show up in terms of cultivating not just wealth, but the way
genuine
that
abundance in life.
Yeah, genuine. Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm open to continue the exploration. I have my chart. I'm using an app that's really good that I've had for a long time. I have all the information. I have
He's a
some
witch,
aspects
burn
of
him.
Venus. Is that what you wanted to know? It's my Venus aspect?
What sign is she in?
Venus, I'm not sure. Oh, there's the planets. Venus is in Aquarius.
Okay. So definitely an intellectual type works very much for you, right? So I hate to say it this way, but you couldn't be with a pretty dum-dum.
What's bad about that?
Well, we should let our audience know. Alex
Well, I
is
mean,
blonde, so-
maybe you could for about half an hour.
More like 3 hours.
Yeah. And then you hit your limit, right?
Anyway, so yeah, there's that, and then there's Venus is in opposition to Mars.
Oh, okay.
And
So
then I'm
resolution of the masculine feminine axis. Okay.
And I'm looking for other planets that Venus is square my ascendant, and in conjunct with Uranus.
And is she in the 4th house or 10th?
Ooh, I'm not sure how to answer that question with the information in front of me.
What's your ascendant? Again,
my natal ascendant
is Scorpio, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then that means that Venus is at the bottom of the chart. So she's likely in the 3rd or 4th, depending on the angles.
Got it. So Venus opposition Mars, doesn't say what house she's in this app. I have the actual chart, but it's the chart part, and I don't know how to read it. Right.
That's okay. So, I can't even see that. But like I said, so she's sitting at the bottom of the chart there. So likely, like I said, she's likely in the 3rd or 4th house, depending on the angles and north and that kind of thing. So the thing about Venus in the 3rd or 4th house is that relationships are incredibly important to you.
Absolutely.
And that is something that really forms the foundation of your well-being. So if she's in the 3rd house, that usually displays itself in more sibling-like relationships and community. Mm-hmm. But when she's in the 4th house, it is that key partnership that is absolutely one of the foundations of well-being for you. Yeah. And also seeing that Venus is in Aquarius, there's an aspect not just of intellectual connection, but also of exploration.
We lost you for a second. You froze up.
No, she's still there.
Oh, you heard her?
Yeah, I heard her fine. I think it might be on your end.
It is on my end. Sorry about that.
All good. But yeah, so there's also an element of someone who's willing to explore life with you, someone who doesn't have all the answers, who's willing to adventure and find them with you, right? And so having that stable home together, and yet at the same time that curiosity to explore life and to learn new things together and to grow and develop, right? And that's something that is absolutely essential for you.
This is very validating. Thank you. And we didn't call you on today to take your privileges for free, just for talking to us.
Well,
but I'm super
why
curious.
not?
Was when you started to really dabble in your own chart,
Mm-hmm.
and you used that tool that your grandfather gave you. You didn't have apps back then. What was your sort of main focus? Like, was it life and purpose, or romance, a combination? What was the thing that was driving your interests?
Well, I was a kid, so it definitely wasn't romance. I much preferred racing the boys and doing martial arts with them. So for me, it was really about trying to figure out myself. So, being a Gemini, I was very adaptable. And so there was a lot that I could do. And it kind of created questions about my identity. And I guess you could say my purpose as well. And so that was really why I consulted astrology books. And then the other element to it too was that I wanted to understand the people around me. I really wanted to understand my parents, my brother, my friends, I wanted to have that understanding of them and who they were, because I had so many questions about myself. And so, of course, that kind of lent to wanting to understand the important people in my life as well. And so that was really the angle that I approached it from, because in having a lot of that flexibility and adaptability to my nature, it didn't lend itself to boxes, I guess you could say. And so I was kind of seeking a box at the time that perhaps I didn't really recognize, but really what I wanted was that higher understanding of who I was and why I was here.
Yeah, I know.
So-
Go ahead, Greg.
That brings up a question where you talk about boxes, which are limitations. And I'm wondering how much in astrology is destiny versus free will? How does free will fit into all this?
So I'm going to quote Shakespeare here. The stars incline, they do not determine.
Nice. Well done.
And
So it's like a,
both are applicable.
okay, right. Like it's a road sign. So you can ignore it. You can give it some
Absolutely.
credence.
And a lot of times, the best way I could explain this, Greg, is that there's always cycles happening in our life. That there's always deeper meaning and purpose that is happening. And astrology is not a limiter. I like to think of it as acquisitional in nature. And so in working with astrology, you're actually walking this path through your life of acquiring more and more of yourself.
Can you break that down? Acquisitional in nature. What does that mean?
Well, basically, let me put it to you this way. We're born into this world, and we get what I would call as this horrible spiritual amnesia. We have forgotten who we are. We have forgotten why we're here. And we go through life trying to figure ourselves out. And there is a lot of learning in that process. So when I say that astrology is acquisitional in nature, what I mean is that it's something you grow into. And there is no limit nor container to how big that could be. And so the same chart could be explained in very personal, minuscule ways. However, we could take it to aspects of grandeur and talk about, the potential of, if you had a world-changing company, right? Or a world-changing purpose or platform of some sort, what that would look like. And so the same chart could be explained in more direct personal ways, and then also in more globally impactful scales as well. And the potential for that is there for everybody, regardless. And so it's, if you were to think of, not that there really is 100% of the chart, so to speak, but as we go through life, how much of that do you acquire? What percent do you pull into your life?
Having the relationship with the information can be a catalyst to wisdom.
Totally.
So I have a very specific question, if you're okay with going. Is there more to say about the subject before I shift the focus?
No, let's go for it.
Got it. So America's going to have its 250th birthday today.
Yeah.
What's the chart? Or not today, this year.
Okay.
What's the chart for us as a country tell you about us?
Well, I would actually have to pull that chart up, but
I don't have a direct time for you. I'm not sure what time the last signature occurred, right?
But do you know what's interesting? I kind of want to talk about something perhaps related and yet not. So
Understood.
Right now, Uranus is going to enter Gemini at the end of April. And when he goes there, he goes into a place that historically astrologers have had a tumultuous relationship with for the U.S. So when the U.S. was founded, when the Declaration of Independence is signed, was signed, I should say, that's the chart that you are looking at historically, and even then, there's a couple debates specifically about the time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different versions of the American chart out there. Now, when Uranus is in Gemini, that has been historically linked to some big events for the US. So Uranus takes 84 years to complete a revolution. And every 84 years, there have been major events happening for the state. So as an example, there was the Civil War, right? So we had, of course, there was the Declaration of Independence, which was the founding of the U.S. But then you had the Civil War. You had Pearl Harbor, right?
Here we go again.
Yeah.
What about the,
God,
Well,
but
no,
what
it's
about
just
the World Trade Centers coming down?
that wasn't an Uranus and Gemini event.
no, it wasn't. You're where? Oh gosh, where was Uranus in 2001? Let me think. Aquarius or Pisces? One of those two. I'd have to take a look there. Likely Aquarius, actually.
So to me, that has me question this all, because Uranus and Aquarius, I know nothing about astrology, obviously, but from what drop I know, I'd say that's like supposed to be a peaceful, loving, open thing. Aquarius.
Could also be revolutionary. So Uranus is the Grand Awakener. That is his nickname, I guess we could say. And yes, he's the Grand Awakener, but sometimes he's also the big disturber. Because there is a rebellious aspect to him. And if we look back in history, Uranus was also tied to events like the French Revolution, where they deposed the monarchy. And so it was very active during that time, and not just active on a collective. Even some of the key figures had Uranus in prevalent places in their chart. And so that really stimulated some of the rebellious kind of tendencies that are the catalyst to change. And so while Aquarius, when I call the name by its esoteric title, which is the world server, it does sound like it should have been a peaceful time, right? But also Aquarius is one of the homes of Uranus. And from that perspective, that also means that he's in his own energy. And so, yes, he could have gone a peaceful route, but then he also, brought in events that were major catalysts, right? And who could deny that the World Trade Center was a major catalyst to what has happened since? I mean, even traveling to this day, we still take off our shoes when we go through security, right? The changes to our awareness of terrorism and its impact in the world, the changes to how security is conducted the world over.
Well, even I think our federal authority is still a remnant of 2001.
So just bringing it back to my original question, which is about our birthday.
Yes. So what's going to happen for the U.S.? Well,
we're going to blow out some candles.
Well, this is what's interesting, because every revolution of Uranus and Gemini, has it created upheaval of sorts? Absolutely. But also, the U.S. has come out better every time. Every time it has happened, the entire country has emerged more productive, revolutionized, more peaceful, more abundant. Right. And so Uranus first dipped his toes in Gemini last year, 2025. And now he'll be entering more fully again. And there's this amazing archive called Broughton's Monthly Reader. And it is an old astrological magazine, I guess you could say, from the 1800s. And it's really amazing because it was actually in print, and so there's some copies that have been retained and put online for you to access, and so I love going back and looking through that. And I believe it was July of. So I apologize. I'm Canadian, so American history, we studied it a little bit. Not so great with my dates, but I was looking at the monthly reader put out by astrologers that happened just before the Civil War broke out. And, here they are talking about the news and, certain states, I believe it was starting to secede or declaring themselves non-participatory, right? And, they wrote, indeed, I shall not be satisfied of peace until Uranus, which they called Herschel at the time, until Herschel leaves Gemini.
So it dips in for every 84 years-ish. How long does it stay there?
Uranus will be in Gemini for 7 years.
Got it.
Now, is the entire 7 years problematic? No.
Maybe none of it's problematic, right? It's not.
Maybe not.
Yeah, history is not necessarily a predictor of future results. But what I think the overall picture that we're getting here from the deep work that you've committed to and the way that you're educating us all is that we can begin to recognize patterns that are reflected in our outer experience and then correlate them as an inquiry, maybe not as a definitive nature, to events as we experience them in our inner life. And having a tool that allows us to have that comparative analysis helps us navigate this wonderful thing called life and this crazy complex thing that we're involved in. And I know that I tend to turn to astrology via the app when I'm at my higher stress points. Do you find that that's true with the people that you are in, that your clientele? Is it really people are like, I'm like at my wit's end, or I'm needing extra information? Does that correlate to your business activity? Is that how it works for you?
As a general rule of thumb, that is absolutely true. So, think about it. When do you ask your friends for advice? You ask them for advice when stuff hits the fan, right? So same thing goes. However, I will admit there are kind of two ways in which people approach astrology. And so sometimes they're not necessarily in a place of like severe hardship, but rather maybe they're navigating a life change. Maybe they're discovering that there's more to themselves, that maybe they are not satisfied by what, the conditions of their life look like anymore. They have grown and evolved, and they need to understand parts of themselves. And so sometimes that is also true. But very often, yes, people come to me in hardship. I mean, why did ancient kings and military rulers consult oracles? They consulted them because something was about to go wrong potentially, and they needed to know what to do, right? And for myself, I'm always working with it. And the reason why is because, well, I don't want things to go horribly badly wrong. But also I love working with astrology from the concept of productivity. So it's not just that I don't want things to go wrong. It's I want to understand what cycles and forces I'm working with so that I can work with them. And so as an example, let's say that I have certain aspects to Saturn happening, like a Saturn transit. right? Well, Saturn transits are correctional in nature. And a lot of times they will bring up foundational aspects of my life, finances, home, work, family. They will bring up things to correct.
Mhm.
And when I recognize that I have this cycle that is asking me to correct things, so that as I progress down the line, that stress or that weak point in whatever that part of my foundation is doesn't collapse, well, why not correct it now so that it's not a huge problem later? Right? And so I like to work with these things and to be cognizant of them, because when I work with those cycles, there is so much growth, joy, abundance, good relationships that comes on the other side of it. And then I'm not constantly reacting to things going wrong and feeling like the universe is dictating what I do or what's happening in my life. Because there's several cycles that are always happening at any given time. And so I have the opportunity to choose what it is that I'm going to engage with. Because as much as I would love to work with all of them all the time, sometimes I have priorities, right? And so I use them to help me with my priorities.
And I think a really great sort of recognition of the way these things impact us in practical ways can be found in how surfers look at the tides, because there's a force that is occurring that has a physical manifestation in the way that the tides are running, that also correlates with the way that the ocean's movement around the earth are. And
Exactly.
so as a surfer, you are looking for those moments where these things align for the best possible outcome for catching a wave or riding a cool wave. And we're, as human beings, surfers show that this is like how it works for them. But there are ways in which we are catching the gravity of these various celestial bodies in our life to ride the wave. And being aware of that, you can know when to paddle out in your life or when to stay home.
Totally. The analogy that I usually give is, every one of us is trying to plant seeds in life. There's things we're trying to grow, and everything has its season. So right now I'm in the winter here in Toronto. The ground is cold, hard, and inhospitable to life. And so if I went to go and try and put a seed in the ground, and I watered it and I stood over it and I got mad because it's not growing. I mean, so there are times like that. And then there are times that it's the equivalent to spring. And that could be very different from what is happening in the rest of the world. So you may have transits that say do this, even though the news is saying, well, this isn't a good time to buy a home or whatever. And it's like, but you have transits that indicate that perhaps it is a good time for you. Right. And so it also creates that agency despite, larger forces.
I want to get into another question, unless, Greg, you have a burning one.
No, go for it.
So there's several different things people key off of in these things. We all, like, what's my sun sign? What's my rising sign? All of my moon. But one of the big ones that I've seen in life is this understanding of something called the Saturn return. So could you lay out what a Saturn return is contextually, its frequency, and what the typical sorts of things are for people that are experiencing a Saturn return?
So I love this because I'm actually doing a forecast for somebody who has a Saturn return happening. So what a timely question. Okay. The Saturn return is one of those things that has a bit of a horrible reputation, to be honest with you, because everybody says that, around 29 to 30 years old, you're going to feel depressed and it's the Saturn return. And that just is what it is. So Saturn, as I spoke about earlier, he is the planet of long-term foundations and actually karma, as well as he cares about things lasting the test of time. because Saturn is also the god of time. So the Saturn return happens at approximately 29 and a half years old. And so you have that 29 to 30 years old window where the potential for the Saturn return occurs. And the Saturn return is your first full cycle of life. So here you are at basically 29 and a half years old. Now it does happen again around 57. 58, 59, sorry. And then, if you happen to see another 30 years, give or take, you could experience it in your 80s as well. So the Saturn return is this time where we look back on our lives and having gone through, I kind of liken it the first time to your initiation into adulthood. I know technically you're an adult, but you're not really an adult until you've hit that Saturn return. So the first time you experience it, and the second time as well, you look back on everything you have accomplished through the last 30 years, give or take. And Saturn is this judge, and he points out your successes, where you've gotten things right, what your victories are, what is going to last the test of time in your life. But then, and perhaps more keenly, he points out where things didn't go right, where improvement is needed. And as human beings in general, we don't have the best relationship with Saturn. Why? Well, how many of us take critiquing very well? We all have this, what I call negative ego, right? And so there is that part of you that can get a little bit defensive or lean into self-judgment.
Wait. I'm really good at taking criticism. Okay. All right.
How about when it comes from within?
Hey, let's not get personal here.
For most of us, the critiques that are outside of ourselves are often a lot kinder than the ones inside of ourselves.
That's what I tend to find is really if I'm resisting something, it's because inside the resonance is too strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big scale, the Saturn return, and that carries a big weight, right?
Yeah.
What other kinds of cycles that we don't focus on are in a similar category? And why don't we look at those quite as much as Saturn returns?
Well, I think my next favorite one is the Uranus opposition. So the Uranus opposition is half a cycle, and it occurs around 42 to 44. So Uranus takes 84 years to complete a full revolution. And I mean, not all of us are lucky enough to have the full one, but the half one is rather interesting because it's one of the aspects that is tied to what we call the midlife crisis. So there's a couple of things that happen in that age gap between 40 to 45. And the Uranus opposition is this revisiting of the archetypes inside of yourself. And so at the Uranus opposition, the archetypes of who we are versus who we have been come into play. And then also there is an element of authenticity that is part of it as well. And this is where cognitive dissonance really comes into play, because during that Uranus opposition, we have this sense of new parts of ourselves seeking expression. So, hopefully you've built your life, you've built your family, you've embarked on your career, right? And now you're reaching this place where wisdom can start to emerge. And as you have built everything, you have this opportunity to really take a look at whether or not what you have built is authentic to who you are and what you want. Right.
So how do you stay in partnership with another when there's these very personal shifts and changes taking place?
Well, here's the thing. One, I think you got to love them regardless and embrace what those new archetypes are, right? And then the other piece to it too is and I love that you're giving me the opportunity to speak to this, because if anybody's going through this right now, a lot of times there's a tendency to kind of rebel against what your life was. Especially if you are experiencing that cognitive dissonance of, this was what I wanted my life to look like, and this is what it looks like. And the greater the distance between those two things, the more likely you are to align with the rebellious qualities of Uranus as opposed to the creative. Right? So it's really important not to judge yourself and not to judge what you did in the past, because I mean, for the most part, people generally act in authenticity as best as they can, right? Now, if you were very clear that, for example, you took a certain job only because of the money and it has nothing to do with who you want to be in the world and what you want your life to look like, well, then you're probably going to rebel. And so very often during that Uranus opposition, it creates the potential for rebellion against your life. So the burning bridges, walking in and quitting your job, or deciding that perhaps this partnership isn't for you, this marriage or whatever kind of relationship you're in. I can make the joke about the guy who walks in, quits his job, gets a mistress, leaves his family and buys a sports car and drives off into the sunset. Mm-hmm. And that would, perhaps it's hyperbole, but that would be an expression of that rebellion that is part of the Uranus qualities. But if you're not having that cognitive dissonance, then Uranus can express itself through you in creative ways. And so the beautiful part about that, because you asked, Greg, how do you live with somebody who's going through this, right? Well, maybe that person is now developing new interests, new areas of inquiry. Maybe they're going to make constructive changes to their career, right? Or maybe they might decide to open their own business.
So what occurs to me is, as an individual, I could sense that rebellious nature, and with this information go, oh, I can channel this differently.
Exactly. You don't have to do it the way that guy did, burning all his bridges with his career, his family, right? You don't have to do it that way. And, Uranus especially, he's this catalyst. So he likes to do things fast, right? And so very often when we make fast changes like that, well, they don't last. And then what happens is, that poor guy doesn't work out with his mistress. She takes all his money. She runs away. The divorce is costly. And he realizes, well, maybe I need to go back to my family, with my tail between my legs and beg for my job back.
So we have such a clear picture of how this manifests for the masculine sort of figure in our culture. What's your experience about how this manifests for feminine beings in this culture? How does it look for them?
You know what? That's a great question. So very often for women, it often manifests as starting to explore themselves outside of the mother archetype. So especially for women who are mothers themselves. And so, oftentimes around that age, your children are starting to develop some kind of independence. And so when that Uranus opposition happens, it opens up the opportunity to begin exploring yourself again and discovering what personal interests you have, what your philosophy is in life, rediscovering what you'd like to manifest for yourself outside of your family.
So isn't an archetype in the feminine area like Stella got her groove back, the stereotypical, the woman goes out on like eat, pray, love and meets a younger lover? And
absolutely could be that way, but it could also be finding new friends and cultivating new interests. I mean, it could be as simple as, becoming a bibliophile, right? Loving books and exploring more and learning about things.
It occurs to me that the three of us, I think, are in agreement that we're not in favor of blowing up lives and bringing pain into life.
Absolutely.
So with this knowledge, it seems one really could have the choice of, oh, I'm feeling squashed. Let me go explore that pottery class down the street, or let me go sign up for this.
Exactly.
And like,
Well, different pressures, right? Different gravitational fields exert themselves differently on different archetypes.
Yes.
So one of the main reasons I asked this question is because we have we really understand the sports car, get the mistress, that whole thing for men, but women have a flavor that's unique to them, but we don't have a language for it in our culture very much. We don't there's
Yeah.
not a clear archetypal description. And I actually am glad of that, because I don't think those kinds of boxes are actually very helpful for people. But I was curious just to see how does it function, because I love women and I love understanding what's happening for them, right?
Yeah, very often it's a lot more in the internal world before it manifests as physical change.
Got it. Thank you for that.
And so it's new lines of inquiry, new areas to explore, maybe career changes, right? Or changes in the way she presents herself.
Haircut.
Yeah, absolutely. New wardrobe.
that's so funny, because she's family to me, and she's a hairdresser, and she says, if you want to change your life, do a radical cut to your hair.
Yeah. That absolutely changes how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. When you look in the mirror, you see something different.
So have you experienced a time in your life of extreme trauma, and how did astrology fit into that experience in time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how long ago was this? 12 years ago. So I had meningitis. And traumatic in a bit of a weird way. Luckily, it was viral meningitis. But they did have me, they had me in like the hazmat, contained part of the hospital and that kind of thing. Kind of freaky seeing people, dressed up like that, right? So for me, what really happened, I guess I could say the traumatic piece to it was that, first of all, I had to lay in bed for 3 weeks. I mean, even just getting up to go to the bathroom, I had to pull out all of my, energy reserves just to do that because that's how fatigued my body was. But coming out of it was really a challenge of my own nature. So I've always been into martial arts and exercise and that kind of thing. And Greg, I will never forget my first day back at the gym. And I picked up just an empty bar to do some lunges as a warm up, so that 45-pound bar. I put it on my back. I went to go do a lunge and boom, my leg collapses right under me. There I am down on the ground. Gym owner's running after me. Alex, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. But it was a real blow to my ego. I mean, was that a life-changing event? Oh, yes, it was.
So how did astrology work with you in that process?
I really had to delve deep into my own nature. And, personally, I have Mars in a position called out of bounds. And so Mars out of bounds has this highly, I guess you could say, competitive energy to it. And it's about creating victory in life. And in that moment, I was not winning. And when you have Mars in highly powered places in your chart, when you're not winning, basically when Mars is not making the conquest, what happens is his energy turns around and it attacks you instead. So I went from, deadlifting 250 pounds easy to I can't even put a bar on my back and do a simple lunge. That was not winning. I can tell you that right there. And I had so much that I had to regain.
But did astrology, here's what I'm wondering, like, was your awareness of where Mars is in your chart an aid to you healing and
Absolutely. It absolutely was, because I constantly had to remind myself of its nature.
So that was helpful to go, oh, I know what this is. Okay.
I know who's
I'm
talking to me.
attacking myself. I see you. It's in a sense like I see you. I can work with you.
Yeah, because within every one of us is multiple archetypes. And so I had to recognize that that archetype was not responding favorably to this life circumstance that I was going through.
Right.
And I had to embrace other parts of myself. Right. And so, I embraced more of my mercurial qualities, and I looked at this as a learning lesson.
It occurs that both you and Marc are presenting astrology as a way of welcoming our ids and shadows and saying, oh, I see you. Okay, let's do this.
Absolutely. And I had to talk to that part of myself, that Mars at a bounds. And I said, listen, we can beat ourselves up for where we're at, or how do you like the sound of a comeback story?
Mm-hmm. So I have two questions that are up for me.
Yeah.
So we can either go a little longer and I can ask both of them. They're not really that related. They don't build off each other that well.
Let's go for it. I'm having fun.
Okay. Do you want the more pragmatic, sort of earthy 3D one, or do you want the more esoteric, sort of expansive one?
Ooh. Oh, that's a hard question. You know what? Which one do you want to ask first? I'm just going to go with what you want.
Okay. I had an experience with my relationship to astrology where I was working with someone who was very much oriented around math and figures and science and materialistic sorts of views of the nature of the universe. And for whom, when I expressed to him I don't even remember what the specifics of the astrological reference that I made to him, he said to me, that all that astrology stuff is not accurate according to the way that the star charts actually work with regards to the way we measure them now scientifically. And so those things are not tracking the way that astrologists think they do. And so I'm wondering to what degree you think his point of view had validity, and how are modern astrologists compensating for what might have been a misalignment of the measuring tools that were available to this over the years?
Okay, so this is a great question. So I differentiate between astrology and astronomy. So hidden within astrology is theurgy, which is called ritual magic. So if we go back to the oldest teachings of astrology, we have to go back to Hermes Trismegistus, who is this mythical figure. And Trismegistus means thrice blessed. And he was thrice blessed because he taught us astrology, alchemy, and theurgy. So the way astrology works with what is called the tropical zodiac is basically the equal divisions based on theurgy. So the premise of theurgy, is we have 12 signs, 12 houses. Each one of them gets their, 30 degrees for the perfect circle, right? And, within those 30 degrees, you have things like angels. And each one of them is as important as the other, right? So when we look at Hellenistic astrology and Sumerian astrology, we are working with that concept, which is tied into the magic and the equal division, almost looking at it like equal departments of, the creator's government, so to speak. right? The different branches. Then there is astronomy. And there are forms of astrological knowledge that work with the universe as it is. So to give you an example, the zodiac sign Scorpio holds, I believe it's 58 degrees of the celestial sphere. So basically, instead of 30 degrees, which it is assigned, right, each one having its equal role, Scorpio occupies 58 degrees of space. So technically, in certain forms of astrology, like Vedic astrology, you are twice as likely to be a Scorpio as you are, let's say, Taurus, which occupies a smaller sphere, right? And they both have their relevance. Every form has its strengths and the areas that it does well with and speaks well to. And so personally, I love working more so with the tropical zodiac because, I have studied the works of Hermes Trismegistus. He's very central to the studies that I have done with the Modern Mystery School, which has very much informed my abilities as an astrologer. And so that is a lineage that works its way from King Solomon all the way back through to the times of Hermes himself. So I prefer to work with the tropical zodiac. I've encountered a lot of success with it. But at the same time, I also know that there is relevance to, what I could call the more galactic, universal map too. And they both have their areas of relevance and things that they speak to.
I love how this moved from the practical question to the esoteric. So I'm going to flow into that now. So having been on an initiate's path of my own, some of the wisdom that's come to me is that Hermes Trismegistus is actually a name for a scholar named Thoth.
Yep.
And so we bring this now into the Egyptian realm of the mystery school, which was interpreted by the Greek and Italians as Hermes, right?
Yes.
So Thoth being a figure in Egyptian history and hierarchy, and who it is said lived 3 lives, 300 years, right? And was one of the main contributors to the Library of Alexandria and all of these other pieces, and to the pharaohs. So
absolutely,
there's a book that I wanted to ask you about, which is called Practical Astrology. And the name on the authorship of the book is a man named Saint Germain.
Yes.
And this book ties in the idea of astrology into Egyptian tarot. And I'm wondering what your exposure is to this knowledge base through this book and what you might want to say about it.
Oh, wow. What a lovely question. So I love that you're bringing it to Egypt, because Egypt was where so many things combined. So I've heard of the potential of Hermes being Thoth. I've also heard of Hermes being somebody who actually dates back even farther, and that basically the knowledge traveled up from the very south of Africa and landed in Egypt. And when it landed there, it encountered the Sumerian magic and the Sumerian teachings and Sumerian astrology, and everything got married together there in Egypt. And then from there, when the Greeks came in, they transported it into Greece. So this is a beautiful question. So are there ties between astrology and tarot? Absolutely. 100% there are, right? And what I love about both of them, because they are different systems, and yet there are correlations. So both of them are archetypal in nature. So Tarot is more of a divination aspect. And what I personally love working with tarot for is for those in the moment questions, situations where you're trying to understand the archetypal forces at nature. Because you know what? Maybe you have a problem with your boss and they're not necessarily going to disclose their birth information to you so that you can go and understand their natal chart, right? Hey, boss, I don't like you, but can you tell me your date, time, and location of birth?
And yeah.
And your social security number while you're
Yeah. How about your bank account passwords?
was
If you're
your
going to
mother's
divulge
name
that, why
again?
not divulge all, right? So tarot is this powerful reflective tool that helps you to understand the archetypal natures at work in whatever you're working with, right? And I love it especially for more human affairs. And when you are dealing with situations that are interpersonal, and really you need to understand the perspectives, the motivations, and needs or desires of multiple parties, right? And so astrology and tarot are both powerful tools. And I mean, the astrological archetypes are absolutely contained within the major arcana and then also repeated through the minor arcana as well. However, astrology is not the only thing that is contained within the tarot. You also have the tree of life, right? So the Kabbalah teachings that are part of it. You have angels that are hidden in there. Everybody looks at the Lover's card and the first thing they see is Adam and Eve, if you're looking at the Rider-Waite deck. However, you also have that Archangel Raphael standing watch over, and symbolizing the higher moral order and making the right decision. So of course there's the elements, and then there's numerology, right? So tarot is this beautiful composite of many systems married together that bring in elements of subtlety to human relations and human affairs, and is, yes, divinatory in nature. But when most people think of divination, the first thing they go to is the future, right? They want to know what the future is. But divination is actually about speaking words of light. And so those words of light can be healing, they can be guiding, they can be revealing, they can be teaching. And tarot, one of the things that I love about it is that it lays the bricks so that you can build a better future. And where you're missing bricks, a good tarot reader is going to come and explain what that brick is, because maybe it's a little bit of self-knowledge. Maybe it's a bit of information. Maybe it's something you need to understand.
Got it. So here we go. We're going to weave this whole conversation back to this very pragmatic aspect of what you bring to your client base. So I read about how you help very practical businesses manage their affairs through the use of some of these tools. And so as someone who coaches CEOs, I know they are very detail oriented, they want to know the formulas, the math, the logic, right? So I'm curious how you are able to bridge the gap between the reputation of astrology and its practical applications to a very discerning business person.
Absolutely. So to begin with, for the most part, when I work with my clients, I'm using forecasting, and that is the primary tool. That being said, though, I always start with a natal chart with my clients, because I need to understand who I'm coaching. I need to know what their strengths and talents are, where they're going to excel, because those are the areas they're not going to need my support. Where they're going to need my support is in those blind spots. And one of the things that I think people often forget about business owners is that they're still human. And yes, they function by numbers and that kind of thing. But then also, we live in a human world where things like your vitality levels and your health absolutely impact your performance. Are those things that you're going to want to, keep on the ball with? Absolutely. Right. Also, astrology provides timing for things. And my role is to help my clients be cognizant of every area of their business, because all of us have our areas that we do well in, right? There's the things we see, and then there's the things that are outside of our perspective that we actually have to turn and glance at. And the thing about life is that very often the things you can see are what occupy your attention. And it's not until something happens that you actually turn and look at the things that are outside of your perspective. So when I work with my clients, my role is to keep them cognizant of all 360 degrees so that they stay on top of their health, so that they can enact business timing, strategic decisions, when to market things. If they are working, like if they have a product-based company, when to work with suppliers, maybe when to even acquire new suppliers, right? To keep things flowing, when to look at system processes or perhaps even make system changes, right? So I like to keep the business owners that I work with cognizant of every area of their life, both personal, right? Because if you're going through a really bad divorce or a hard time in your relationship, is that going to impact the work you do? 100% it is. I'd love to say that we're all compartmentalized beings, but that's not true, right? So I keep them cognizant of their personal lives and on the ball, and professionally as well, in terms of the decisions that they're making. Because when you have an understanding of these worlds, you can also, I guess I could say, more easily juggle your priorities. Because the bigger the enterprise you're working with, the more energy you have to output to manifest and keep that flowing, which means that you need to have everything finely dialed in and have the right support behind you.
Fabulous. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to experience the blessings of interacting with you? What's the best way to reach you?
Oh my, well, that's quite the compliment, Mark. Thank you. So I would love to connect with anybody. They can find me on my website, astrologerroyale.com. And while they're there, I actually have a free ebook that they can download called Star Powered Resilience. And it is a guide to your professional strengths and talents, as well as there's some tips, tools, and tricks for each zodiac sign to mitigate stress. And if you happen to know your Mercury and Mars sign, it even gives you more nuanced information.
Fabulous.
Real quickly, what's the Royale? How did that come into the title?
Well, if we go back in history, astrologers were the ones who advised royalty, statesmen, merchants, and as well as military leaders. And if we look at what astrology has become today, some of it's debauchery. If you go on TikTok, I can't go look there, but then also it's become these personality boxes in psychology, and that's it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not really serving the way that it used to. And so the Royale was kind of my tip of the hat to the original role that astrologers occupied in not only trying to take care of leaders, but also trying to take care of the entire body of people that they serve. Because when I serve people who are CEOs or entrepreneurs, yes, I'm serving them and I'm contributing to their success, but also that serves their family, that serves the people that they work for. It means that their companies continue to grow and that other people will be served by that growth too.
Got it. Well, this has been really fun and enlightening, and I'm sure we could continue, but we've reached the point in the program where we ask the question that we ask all of our guests. Now, both of us love this question. It means a lot to us, and it comes from this deep heart-centered place. So there's no wrong answer. Let's just put it that way, number one. But it is very important to us. So Greg, if you wouldn't mind doing the honors.
Thank you. And thank you, Alex, for your time and energy. It's been wonderful. All right, here we go. Eminem or Foo Fighters?
Oh, what a hard question. That's not fair. It depends on the mood.
Good answer.
So what's the mood right now?
You know what? I'm going to go Foo Fighters right now.
All right.
I'm going to go Foo Fighters.
Thank you.
But if I had a lot I needed to work through, or if I needed to drum up some energy, I'd be Eminem all the way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will make sure to put all of the appropriate links to you. And thank you so much for being so generous with your heart and your wisdom. And we wish you the grandest success as you go forward. And please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to see you another time if that feels resonant. And thank you for your time today.
I had the most amazing time with the two of you. Thank you.